Welcome to Evidence-Based Audio Engineering and Education, number 133. And this is audio interfaces again. It seems like we're always talking about audio interfaces on here in some way, shape, or form, right? So we're going to get into that in a second. And as you may or may not be able to see, if you're on Instagram or TikTok, you can't, but I'm still continuing to use Red and Roll's Vegas and Acid theme for Reaper, and it's continuing to develop some little issues, some things that Reaper can't quite do the way Vegas did. Let me shut this fan up. Ooh, big pop. Yeah, same ground as the rest of the audio right there, right? But I'm really liking this theme, and I think we're going to be on a winner sooner or later with this thing, and I'm already using it full time. And let's see, Glenn Fricker is finally doing a reason-based audio tribute to me, apparently. So lately we've seen him talking about power amp. A and B tests, ABX tests. Maybe he didn't go so far as the ABX test, but he was doing some apples to apples tests, or thought he was. He had a t-shirt about the professional turd polisher. He did a Tonewood video, and now I see a Science Says You're an Idiot t-shirt at his site. So good job, Glenn, and welcome to the reason-based community. Actually, he's always kind of been there, but I give him crap from time to time. Especially when there's like a clickbait one about can you play metal on a Les Paul or whatever, right? All right, so the biggie here is going to be audio interfaces. And I'm going to put the chat up on the screen so I can see it in case you guys are on here. Just test the chat real quick. Now, if you want to actually get on here, I can. I'll let you on. There's a link in the YouTube, Twitch, and Facebook versions of this show where you can click in the description and you can pop into the chat, or just type your questions right in, whatever, or comments or insults or whatever else you have. The purpose of today's show, really, because this keeps coming up. And it's scary that the name here is Schwa. It's not that Schwa, okay? Let me read his post here. I have kind of painted myself into a corner with my old PC. I've been using an HP system along with Motu 2408 PCIe interface for many years now. A lot of you guys might know, in the big room over here, I have two Motu 2408 Mark IIs. Those are from 1998 or 1999. There's a pair of them. They're using a newer 424 PCIe card or PCI card or PCIX, whatever it is. I have a couple of them. I believe that there's been a newer driver. I had been worried because it looked like the last driver was 2015, but I think there's a newer one now. It's scary because we think about electronics like 3 to 5 years. That's your shelf life. That's it. They're dead after that. But this thing's been going since 1998. Some of you guys might know the clock source inside this whole place is a Aardvark from the 90s, and it works. And when you've had audio over PCI, it's hard to get used to USB or anything else. I know everybody's talking about Thunderbolt. We'll get into that later. But when you've got audio over a hard wire like that, it's just so fast, and it's hard to give up. That's why these two pieces from 1998, they're still great. We still use them every day. I mean, the performance is tremendous. How many people are out there? They're using audio Me 9652s. In fact, I think Justin still got the one I sent him to develop Reaper on. I know they got new drivers for those, so it's hard to get rid of some of this stuff when we've had many shows showing that interface technology hasn't necessarily gotten that much better for the buck. So he continues, well, my PC was running Windows 7 and is becoming more difficult to keep things current. Windows 7 is no longer supported. I know we have a lot of customers that are still on Windows 7, and they just will not leave it. And it's hard, man, but you're talking about embedded software at that point. As long as you don't want to install anything new, fine, just leave it be and play it till it dies. But all that said, Windows 10 hasn't been so bad. I mean, I use it every day. I'm not really having those issues with it. Of course, there are drivers that you're not going to be able to find anymore, but the Motu are not that. Let's go there real quick. So I'm going to go to Motu's download section, and I see, let's see. Let's just go to the drivers downloads. I'm going to downloads, Motu Gen 5 installer, Motu M series installer, Motu Pro Audio installer, Motu Audio installer. Well, I don't see. Where's the PCI? It is scary. Let's see. What is it called? The 424 card? Ooh, it's not showing at all. Additional resources. Supports Windows 7 and later. AVB. Older versions. Yeah, see, this is 2015. Motu M series. Sorry, guys. I'm just looking for AVB switch. I'm just looking for what's new. There is a 2015 installer. Ooh, there's a 2020. Wait, let's see. Windows. Mac's got a 2020 installer. Windows has a 2015 installer. Let me look for the older versions. Okay, yeah, this is it. So this is a 2408 driver. So yeah, there's a 2015 driver. So you're not out of luck if you have to change to Windows 10 with this thing. You'd be okay. A little bit scary that this driver hasn't been gone through since 2015, but it was working back then. We have some quirks and stuff, but it's not anything big. Nothing compared to what you're dealing with USB audio. Okay, so he continues. At the time, I had a heck of a time finding a PC that would support a nice video card and the Motu card. Even the one I have has things in there kind of tight. As before, finding a PC that will support both cards is not easy. All of my computers right now, I could run my 424 on. It's not an issue. I'm not sure what this problem is. I know there are many USB interfaces that will work fine for basic tracking, but I'd like to build something a little bit more robust. I'd like to replace my old Motu with something comparable with modern rack mount 8 in and out. I'd like to have a new interface that doesn't need a wide PCI slot. Will Thunderbolt work on Windows? And how many shows have we had on that question? Or will Thunderbolt work, period? Never mind, just on Windows. What are Windows users selecting for the best low latency performance these days? Is it comparable to my old school Motu card? And that's the crazy thing. No. For the most part, your old school Motu or an old school RME is going to beat the crap out of them. And he continues, I've done some casual research, not had much luck. Any advice would be appreciated. Now, some of you guys know, I keep saying some of you guys know, but some of you guys do know. I'm using an RME RME Digiface USB. That's a USB interface, $500 interface. It has 4 ADAT ports and a headphone out, and I think that's it. There's no word clock or anything like that. It's good. It's not as fast as the HDSP 9652 was, but I don't have any issues with it at all. I'm running it with like 6 milliseconds round trip latency, somewhere around there. What is it saying right here? It's reporting 2.7 and 3.7, so maybe 7 or 8 milliseconds. I don't care. As long as it's under 10 milliseconds, I really don't care. I know a lot of you latency purists are going to go crazy on that, but depending on what you're doing, actually, there are issues where you have to worry about that. Okay. So, Slayer Bear, This is always a good source. If you're ever on TGP or any of the other forums this guy's on, I don't know what this guy actually does, because he seems like a home studio guy, but he really has his stuff together. So he says, up until a few months ago, I was using FireWire. I had been using it for 15 years. I probably still would have been using it, but I got a wicked deal on a Motu 828 ES. Now, the Motu 828 ES, let me just see what that is. I think that's a Thunderbolt card, or I call them sound cards. I know I'm not supposed to. Here's a Motu 828 ES. And remember, over on my site at pipelineaudio.net, I have a lot of articles and charts on. Every time I get a chance to really test an interface, I'll mess with it. Okay, so this one says 28 inputs, 32 outputs. It looks like 2 ADAT ports, both in and out. 8 analog in and outs, time code, sends. Probably has some loopback, SPDIF, word clock in and out. And then USB 2, I think Thunderbolt, and Ethernet. So this may be like an Ethernet. What do we call? So remember, we tried Dante. We had a couple shows about Dante. I don't recommend Dante on my worst enemy. That was an audio over Ethernet, or that was the claim anyway. I don't think it lived up to it. Motu has something called AVB, which is supposed to be something similar, but again, I think you have to use special Ethernet stuff. Okay, so it says high performance Thunderbolt and USB drivers for Mac and PC. Round trip latency as low as 1.6 milliseconds at 96 kilohertz over Thunderbolt with high performance hosts. So it has USB, Thunderbolt, and AVB, TSN, whatever TSN is. Maybe that's another thing. We're going to have to go over what TSN is. Let me read the ad anyway. Connect to your Mac or PC with Thunderbolt or high-speed USB 2.0 with up to 256 audio channels, 128 in and 128 out over Thunderbolt. Or stream dozens of audio channels to and from your Mac over AVB, TSN, Ethernet using a standard affordable Cat5e cable up to 100 meters long. Class-compliant firmware and industry-standard drivers work with any audio apps. Connect to your iPads with the standard camera connection kit adapter. I think that AVB, I'm probably gonna have Tim Gray on here when I can. We're gonna talk about AVB and whatever TSN is. This guy knows his network audio, and we'll have a show maybe next week with him, and we'll talk about this, because Motu hasn't given up on this. I've been watching for the last 5 or whatever years, and I thought they were going to give up by now, but they haven't. So it's looking like this AVB may be a thing. But anyway, that's what Slayer Bear's using. So let's go back to what he has to say. He says, Thunderbolt and USB 2, wireless control. The software that comes with it is amazing. I actually got rid of a lot of my outboard gear, which the 828 ES replaced. TalkBack, 2 sets of monitor outputs. I can honestly say my setup is future-proof by at least 20 years. Oh, man, you just jinxed yourself. Using Windows 10, I've had no problems whatsoever. Alan Dunn answers, Thunderbolt 3 is available on Intel and AMD chipsets. Latency is defined by more than just the interface. Okay, hold on. Now, Thunderbolt 3 is available on Intel and AMD chipsets. According to my newest motherboard, whatever that was, that PSUS or ASUS or whatever thing, I've got that, or at least I can buy a header for it or something. I don't know if it works. I'm still so confused. I've been asking Jim Roseberry from time to time to explain this, but I'm still, I don't know. Can you just throw a Thunderbolt card in and go? I don't know. This is one of the areas where Google, like we talked about, Google has lost the ability to inform by so much. It's really hard to get real answers on this. But the second sentence is kind of the reason that I picked this article today. Let me just make sure I'm going okay. It says latency is defined by more than just the interface. Not the latency that he's talking about. Latency, okay, aside from converter latency, the drivers of that interface determine everything about your round trip interface. Your round trip latency so you start at your microphone or whatever. You go into your mic preamp, whatever. That's all happening pretty fast, like speed of light. Don't worry about it. Next, you're going to your analog digital converter. Now you got converter latency. And then you have your buffer on the input. Whatever processing happens, and your buffer on the output. That's your round trip latency. Now, you could have a latent plug, and so that whatever processing that happens is a bunch of time. But assuming you don't actually have something going on, or you're using what they call zero latency plugins or whatever, you've just got your input buffer, your output buffer, and whatever possible hidden safety buffer is sitting there, which is a whole nother thing. This is why you can't always trust what it's saying on the what the drivers are reporting to your audio program. Like, for instance, I'm looking at Reaper right now. It says 48 kilohertz, 24-bit wave, 32-bit, 32 by 32 channels, 128 samples, and it's calling it 2.7 in, 3.7 out over ASIO. Lots of times you could say something like that and then find out you got like a 5 millisecond hidden safety buffer on there. So that's what your latency is. But that's it. It's not determined by your computer or by what you're doing with stuff until you start dropping out, of course. But I wouldn't call that latency. I would just say that you're not keeping up. He says, simply being offline even improves latency. No, it doesn't. It depends how you're saying it. So are you calling improves latency, meaning that you could get to a lower latency without it clipping? Because 16 buffers is 16 buffers is 16 buffers. I know that sometimes things happen that change that a little bit, but not really. Being online or offline is not going to change what 256 buffers does, or 256 samples buffer does. Being online versus being offline could make the difference between whether or not you could run at 128 samples instead of 256. But it's not going to change the round trip latency of either of those buffer sizes. He also goes on, I'm in a similar situation with Windows 7. I'm waiting for Windows 11 in October before I make a decision. Wow, is that coming up? We haven't even done a Windows 11 show. I think I might have mentioned it once, but I don't know anything about it. Hey, Lenore. But I want you to understand that this is wrong. Latency is defined by more than just the interface. No, it's not. Not the round trip latency. Simply being online even improves latency. No, it doesn't. Not the round trip latency. Again, what the computer can determine, regardless of the drivers, is how low of a buffer size can you go to before it starts making trouble. That's true, but that's not your round trip latency. Okay, Strat. I probably shouldn't say most of these guys' names because I'm going to say stuff about them. Somebody else says you could look at something like UA Audio for Thunderbolt 3. I wouldn't. Or Focusrite Scarlett using USB-C. Is Scarlett using USB-C? Or is that... What is USB-C? We've done this before, and I'm sorry that I can't remember, but I know there's USB 3, but isn't USB-C just a shape of a port? Hold on. USB-C. What is USB-C? It's just a connector. So it could be, because I have USB-C on my Scarletts, and they're only doing USB 2. So I think it's just a shape. So Universal Audio, you know how I feel about them. I don't know. Maybe it works. I wouldn't trust. He says the latter should be available for most newer PCs and decent laptops. TB3 is available for Windows, but not all machines come with the Thunderbolt 3 connection, though if you build a desktop, it'd be simple enough to spec something for TB3. Maybe. Now, somebody else says, internal cards for sound are mostly in the past. Motherboards have their own onboard sound processors. Well, which is it? Unless you're saying that, adding a PCI to a desktop or something, I don't know. Hooking up a load of audio inputs and outputs to the back of your PC is just a workload and clutter you don't need. A box outside of the PC is how it's been done now for over a decade. I don't know what he's saying here. Okay, now here's a claim. A USB 2 connection is more than sufficient to pipe any audio stream to your computer because the human hearing threshold is the limiter to how much audio data you really need. No. No. USB 2 has a limit. Look, I'm using USB 2 with my setup here. If I didn't think it worked, I wouldn't be using it. But this a USB connection is more than sufficient to pipe any audio stream to your computer because the human hearing threshold is the limiter to how much audio data you really need. If he's talking about one single thing and he's talking about like sample rates like 44K versus 192 kilohertz or whatever, sure. But if you got, right now, if you go out and look at my studio, I've got a pile of drums out there with mics on everything, and there's mics all over the room. I need to stream in and out at very low latencies, like 20-something channels of audio. You're getting near where USB is going to have some issues. I'm okay so far. Knock on wood. But no, this has nothing to do with the human hearing threshold. You need the bandwidth you need. And sorry, but this guy's oh boy, this is the 20th anniversary of the biggest faith-based initiative that ever hit America. And so it's just kind of crazy to think about that this guy's Motu was made before the September 11th attacks. Probably gonna get nailed for this, but I gotta say it. We're still reeling over this stuff. Science flies you to the moon. Religion flies you into buildings. And that's probably all I should say on that. Anyway, so this guy's thing is 20 years old, and it can stream audio in and out faster, better, more reliably than the newest USB interfaces, or at least the USB 2 interfaces. I think there's something to do with USB 3 that may be faster, but I haven't seen it. So he goes on. Just remember, watch. This is why I want you guys to hear on this thread. I don't usually read out threads and stuff, but there's enough misinformation you really got to keep an eye on. Okay, sorry. He goes on to say, what is much more important is processing power and memory these days for digital work. Really? I get a lot of work done on old laptops with 4 gigs of RAM. I don't really run into the memory issues. I know that people say you will. Processing power, great. The more processing power, the better. But honestly, the crappiest computer you could buy today is way more than capable of mixing dozens of albums I've done back in. So let's see. Nearly every new PC system in the last 5 years can handle audio latency with no problem. It just isn't a factor anymore. I tend to sort of agree with that. A newer computer is going to be a newer, decent Windows or Mac computer, not like some kind of netbook or something, should be able to handle most interface if you can plug them in. Now, we've had enough talk about Apple and OS X and all that stuff. Assuming you can actually use the device on your OS X product, it's probably going to be fine. Okay. Now he goes on to continue. The choice of USB audio interface is what is important to make sure you have enough ins and outs. I say you can't go wrong with the Focusrite. I say you can. And if you were looking over here, you'd see my giant Focusrite banner, but it's not necessarily going to be the right thing for you. What is your choice with Focusrite? You could go to the Dante thing, which no thank you. We tried. You can get the 18i20, and that means you buy that interface, then you put another ADAT compatible converter set, which we've talked many times about on here. Then you've got 18 in and out. But what if you need his 2408 will do 26 channels in and out. What if you need more than 18? So maybe you can go wrong. I don't think Focusrite has a solution for more than 18 inputs right now. Maybe their old FireWire one, whatever. He goes on, what really matters more in the end is the quality of your monitor, speakers, and headphones. Well, not if you're clicking and popping all over the place. What's the point in having a high-spec DAW system with a great USB audio interface and yet only mediocre monitors and headphones? You should be putting in your cost there just as much, if not more, as you would your treasured hi-fi system or guitar rig setup. That's probably true-ish. Okay. Now here comes the real experts, and you guys know who I look up to for this. Jim Roseberry and Vin Curigliano. Curigliano, I think is how you're supposed to say that. You guys may remember a couple times I got kicked off the Reaper. Almost got kicked off the Reaper users group on Facebook by a really crappy moderator. We had a lot of trolls on there that when you ask a technical question that has to do with Reaper in there, they all attack, and then the moderator backs them up. And not Kenny, okay, not Kenny. Kenny will fix things if I bring it to his attention. I don't want to torture him. But we had a bunch of guys trying to gaslight me over DAW building stuff. And then I said, well, here's what Jim Roseberry had to say. And they're like, who's Jim Roseberry? I'm blah, blah, blah. I'm like, nobody knows who the hell you are. If you're building DAWs, you better know who this guy is. I'm sorry. I think he has a company called Perfect Audio. Let's go to his website here. StudioCat.com. Let's see. Yeah, Perfect Audio at StudioCat.com. You can go buy a pre-built DAW from him. Same as Vin. But he knows his stuff, okay? He's put me in my place a couple times, and this is the guy to listen to. So if somebody's trying to nail you over this guy's advice, go elsewhere. Or just ask Jim yourself. You can actually call him up and pay him or whatever. So Jim has to say is, the best USB audio interfaces yield roughly 4 milliseconds total round-trip latency. The best Thunderbolt audio interfaces yield sub 1 millisecond total round-trip latency. Now, Jim came on a couple forums talking about the PreSonus Quantum, I think it was. And that was kind of a higher channel count Thunderbolt. I almost got one because of what he was talking about. But, the RME thing works. I love RME. I'm an RME nut, sorry. And PreSonus has had some... we've had some issues over the years with PreSonus, right? A couple kind of big knockdown, drag out ones, but we're generally friendly. Jim says both cases are subject to the machine being able to sustain the load, glitch free. That's where we're talking about clicks and pops and stuff. If you're not pushing the limit of ultra low latency audio performance, a USB audio interface will be more than adequate. Regarding the machine, for working at lowest possible latency, clock speed is the single most important factor. So you guys with your Ryzens with like 50,000 cores or whatever, that may not matter that much to your low latency performance if you're running a bunch of plugins and stuff. It's going to be your single core processing speed that's going to make the big fat difference in most DAWs. There's some DAWs that just run crappy no matter what, and it actually might run better with multi-cores. But he says you need enough RAM for your largest projects. Having lots of additional unused RAM doesn't yield any additional performance. And that's kind of what I was saying earlier, right? The more you're pushing the performance boundaries, the more important the machine. If you're wanting to do things like effectively run Helix native at 1 millisecond round trip latency, 96K using a 32 sample ASIO buffer size, the machine configuration is important. Thus spake Jim Roseberry. Okay. He didn't get too much into the details, but he does from time to time. So the original poster, again, Schwa, but not that Schwa, says, thanks for sharing. It seems that many think USB is sufficient, but I'm skeptical. And you're right to be skeptical. Again, Schwa, I run USB too. It's so far, it's good for me. I know what I'm doing. I could run lower latencies probably with the Motu you already have. He says, it also seems that Thunderbolt is speedy, but I can't seem to find any examples of folks running with Windows. Good point. This is like we've been saying, how many shows now, how useless Google has been lately. It's true. And there actually are a couple. If you go on the Reaper forum, you're going to find some. I think in some of the Discord groups, you'll be able to find it. And then, like we were talking earlier about that Motu 8 A2080S, He says, I didn't mention it, but what about Ethernet? Seems to be available, but not common. We've all got Ethernet. Ethernet drivers have been around for forever. We should be way farther on Ethernet audio, but we're not. We've got dongles like Dante. Again, man, I know you guys love Dante, but I really didn't have a good time with it. And then we've got the AVB stuff that it still seems like you need your own different separate network system for it. So Rockabilly 69. Okay, I'm going to name him because he says probably the most sensible advice. Just get the best RME interface that will work with your new PC, best Windows drivers on the planet. Bar none. Vin Curgliano has a podcast called DawBench. And if you don't know about DawBench, this was how we actually determined the performance of DAWs. He created a test system. Let me find. There's an episode of DawBench. It is called Episode 3, Audio Interface Low Latency Performance, RME Setting the Bar. And he has Mathis Carstens on here from RME. And they're talking about how they still got drivers from 20 years ago. And they're not kidding. I hate, I always try and be very gear agnostic on here. But RME has been consistently so good for decades that if one of their products fits what you're trying to do, I would just get an RME. Honestly, that said, I just bought 2 Focusrite 4i4s. I'm probably gonna be talking about that later in this episode. But you can't go wrong, man. I'm sorry, it's a pretty good idea. Just buy the RME stuff. But check out that DawBench radio show, episode 3 with Matthias Carstens from RME. Okay. Now we have somebody else say, in a real world scenario with USB, you have the ability to work with up to 40 channels of broadcast quality audio simultaneously. Yet there are some companies who squeeze far higher channel counts from their USB to audio interfaces by building their own USB controllers, RME. These tend to be among the more costly options. So that's from a Sound on Sound audio. Now, if you're saying 40 channels of broadcast quality audio simultaneously, if you're talking about 20 in and 20 out, that may not be enough. But like I say, with this RME, I'm doing 32 by 32 and running Gen. Now, somebody else says, can anyone else chime in on USB-C as an alternative? And again, I think, like we were looking at earlier, that USB-C is just a shape. It's a port type. It's not actually a protocol, like USB versus USB 2 or USB 3. He says, my new Motom 2 has this, and I'm seeing it more frequently on new motherboards. And somebody says USB-C. Honestly, Thunderbolt is already dropped on iPhones and iPads. They migrated to USB-C. If their computers still use Thunderbolt, I am not up to date on Macs. How long will they continue? I would look at a few companies, Antelope Audio, and you know how I feel about those guys, and Universal Audio. Blah. Sorry. And because I'm a Steinberg guy, the Neve preamp Steinberg interfaces. And is that true? Is Apple dropping Thunderbolt? I swear USB-C is there because it's smaller. That could be wrong. Maybe it carries power better. Now, again, I say Antelope. Antelope made some magical clock claims, and you know how we are about if you're going to make a claim, you better be able to back it up. And I have seen nothing to back up the magical clock claims. So I don't know. That Antelope stuff costs a pile, and they make weird claims, so I'm not really sure. Somebody else says, I'm pretty sure Apple is still using Thunderbolt on everything. Thunderbolt and USB converged on the same connector, so TB now looks like USB-C, but it is using the TB protocol. Also, a lot of companies are switching to the USB-C connector, but if you read the fine print, their interfaces are still using the USB 2 protocol. The advantage of switching to the USB-C connector is more power, but it's backwards compatible to USB 2, so they don't need to rewrite their drivers. Okay, so that was what I was thinking earlier. USB-C is just a connector shape. It's not the protocol itself. Could be USB 3. Apparently, it could be Thunderbolt. Okay, somebody else says USB-C is not a data protocol. It is a connector cable spec only. TB34 has adopted USB-C and so has USB 4. The mere presence of a USB-C port does not tell you what protocol that port uses. You have to look at the little icon above the port to know if it's a USB data protocol or a Thunderbolt protocol, or in some cases, yes, even both. Now, that's a good idea. Hey, Kavika. But I would strongly suggest that you look at the new Mac M1 chip computers. I don't know. Amazing bang for your buck, power to be had there, and you can go full-on Thunderbolt right out of the box or choose a USB interface. Okay, let's look at these Mac M1s. I know Mike went and bought one of our programmers an M1, so M1. I want something strong enough. See, I don't know what's strong enough to run a modern DAW. What compares to like an i7 right now? So here's a 13-inch M1, 8 gigs RAM, 512 gigabytes for $1,500. I mean, who knows? How powerful is this M1 versus my 10700 or whatever that thing is? Yeah, what's in my lap? What is this one? This is the let's just look about this PC. I can't remember the CPU name. This is a i7. Okay, so let's just look. Are there different M1s, or is there only one M1 right now? So M1 versus 107, 10700K. Okay, here we go. Here's the benchmark. Apple M1 versus Intel Core i7 10700K. Okay. See the. Oh, this is the one Jim recommends. You can go up to 5.1 as the single core speed. Remember, single core speeds was going to matter to your round trip latency. I'm seeing a comparison, but I need to see what these things can actually run. Says that it's getting faster on Cinebench for single core performance than that i7. So maybe this is. See, multi-core performance is way behind. Cinebench R20, it's completely dominated by the i7. Single core. Yeah, this is weird. So the newest Cinebench, it looks like Apple M1 is doing better, but all these other regular comparisons. So Geekbench is saying that it's doing better than the i7. Not for multi-core. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe this is okay, $1,500. I would probably still stick with the Intel. Plus, you're not having to get messed up by Apple's stuff. Okay, Jim answers again. I've been running Thunderbolt audio interfaces under Win 10 for a long while. Apollo 8, Fireface UFX Plus, Quantum, and Orion Studio Synergy Core. If you know what you're doing, all details tended to, Thunderbolt audio interfaces are rock solid under Windows 10. See now, Jim, now you're going to cost me a bunch of money because then I'm going to want a Thunderbolt thing. Somebody else says, audio driver stability is critical. RME does a fantastic job with their Windows drivers. Their interface hardware and mixer software is very good as well. Yep. I'd love to see more virtual loopback RME. Somebody else. Just passing on a little detail that I learned after visiting a link to the 2015 Sound on Sound article that was linked above. I bought a Focusrite 8i6. It has a USB-C connector on the interface. I stupidly thought this would mean it would give me better communication between the interface and the connector, but yes, USB-C is just the connector style. The 8i6 is limited to USB 2 transfer rates. No need for a faster USB speed on the computer side. That's kind of sad. Well, I mean, if the the USB 2 is way more than fast enough for that 8i6, no matter what you do with it. Yeah, see, here's my problem. Somebody else is saying this. I almost pulled the trigger on a RME UCX2 over the weekend, but missed out on the right deal. The baby face is a lot easier to swallow price-wise, but I don't love the form factor, and I need XLR speaker connectors, which sort of cuts into the savings. But I'm curious what else I would lose out on if I went that route. I believe the UCX has more DSP as well as auto gain features, but I'm I'm not thrilled with RME's form factors either. I mean, what have we needed for years? An 8 IO with mic preamps, and then 2 more ADAT ports, so you can get 24 channels. That's basically what most people need if they need a lot. Yeah, don't go with the AMD if you need single core performance. The AMD is going to get smoked. The AMD is going to win with the multi-core performance. So I was getting a little comment about go with AMD. Remember that. So like we were talking about earlier, when you're talking about round trip latency, your single core clock speed is what matters. And Intel is still smoking the crap out of the AMDs on that one. But once you get into multi-core performance, AMD is just spitting out cores, man. So you can if you are multi-core optimized, you can do a lot more with the AMDs. Anyway, we were talking about how we'd like to see that 8 mic preamps and then another 16 over ADAT. And RME's Fireface traditionally has had like 4 mic preamps. And it's just a weird configuration. RME, just give us the 8 plus, that's what we really want, please. Maybe you have something newer on these new Thunderbolt ones. I don't know. Actually, let's take a look at what RME's got right now. RME video. I don't want to. We'll find it. Okay. So, and they still do a lot of internal cards. Look at that. Products, internal cards. Still got all of these. Okay. MADIFace USB, Fireface. Let's look at this UCX and UFX and UFX Plus. I don't know what all these things are. Let's see. They got the 12 mic. They got some weird ones that I just don't know what exactly they are. So let's look at the Firefaces. So there's UCX, 36 channel Fireface, and so it's 2 mic preamps. Nope. UCX2, USB 2 mic preamps. Nope. UC, is that the old one? Oh, why is this going so slow? 2 mic preamps, UFX2. Oh, I got to look at that 802 in a second. Okay, so UFX2 looks like the one that I'm used to. It's got like 4 mic preamps. It's got USB. Yeah, USB. It's probably got the 24 ins and outs. They always number them funny. Okay, let me look at the 802. 802 has 4 mic preamps, USB and Firewire. So this is like the old one. Let me see what this UFX Plus is. Yeah, 4 mic preamps. So yeah, again, we still don't RME. But I mean, it's good for me. I just buy those Focusrite, Octoprix, whatevers, and then I should just plug 4 of those into my RME Digiface USB. So because that's got 4 ADAT ports. Anyway, so let me go. So here's somebody else. Sorry, let me continue. It says, I'm mostly happy with my Focusrite 6i6 Gen 2, but I think I'd be able to have more flexibility tracking with QMixes and an interface with some DSP and a better routing app. Also, the loopback in the Generation 2 Focusrites is a bit weird workaround, and I'd rather have an interface that has it built in. If I have time, I'm going to talk about the Generation 3 Focusrite loopbacks. I'm not thrilled about that at all. I don't know. The QMix things, I really do use a lot of the Total Mix features on this RME card now that I think about it, which is kind of crazy because usually I just ignore all that stuff. But I am using that for a lot of the routing that I need to do for the broadcast side of things. Also for headphones, I'm actually using the let's see, I don't know if you can see this thing. It's the RME ARC USB controller. I'm using it as I got rid of my central station. I'm using that by itself. Somebody else says there's nothing wrong with USB 2 for the vast majority of users, and that's true. If you're not doing 24 channels in and out, and you do whatever. Personally, I would be looking for an Motu 828 latest version. Seems great and very solid from what I can gather reading about them. No issues here with the lowly Behringer UMC202 HD. Rock solid stability and about 5 millisecond latency for guitar plugins. I don't know about that. I think that, well, I mean, I guess you could do that at 16 samples or something like that. But again, these guys have a pretty big hidden safety buffer. And if you're on Mac, you can't turn that off. So you're kind of stuck with that. But that said, we were just using a Behringer XAir 18. It's just the same drivers, the same Dessicon drivers, as Vin says. I swear it's the Sycon, but whatever. It's using the same drivers, and we're doing okay with 18 in and out on that thing. So, and again, those are the same drivers pretty much everybody's running. I would be surprised if PreSonus and Focusrite, and maybe even Motu aren't using those same Dessicon drivers. So, man, it's hard to pay extra for. And we know that Audient, the one everybody's always got all this hype all over, they're using those same drivers too, right? So, you know, for most of you guys, that Behringer's going to be fine, man. Don't kill yourself. Okay. What do we get on chat? Nothing. So the original poster asking that your experience is encouraging. I'm wondering if a Thunderbolt card could be added to a Win 10 PC with the little connector on the PCI X slot to be a bottleneck. Some of the replies reinforce there are many ways to go. I think I want to re-examine the Thunderbolt path. The challenge seems now that Thunderbolt PCs are not common. Is it more common to add Thunderbolt? Are the cards or any cards more popular? Now this is a specific question somebody's asking Jim, and I don't know. When I ask this, I don't really get good answers, and I don't know if that is something that, you know, it's his business to actually help people do this stuff. So maybe I just need to pay him for the answer for this and keep it to myself. Is that how that works? I don't know. But I'm hoping, I'm not looking at it right now. I'm looking away. I'm hoping that he gives a very specific answer, because if there is a card that we can just stick on here and get Thunderbolt, Jim, I'm going to go buy a Thunderbolt interface and we're going to test it out, and I'll probably send it back because I love my RME. Okay. So here comes Jim to speak. And this is something you got to take into account. For what it's worth, I've been building custom PC DAWs professionally for 25 plus years. When it comes to Thunderbolt, you need to know all the details. Don't leave anything to chance. See, this is where I get worried. Thunderbolt under Windows 10 is absolutely rock solid. You can't add a PCIe Thunderbolt controller to just any PC. Motherboard has to specifically support Thunderbolt and have a Thunderbolt header. Now, I asked, does mine, the one he recommended me get, actually this interface that I got, does this one actually have it? Hey, Mana. I don't know that I got a real good answer. The company says, I think Asus says they do, but I didn't really get a good sense of how I'm supposed to use this thing. Motherboard's Thunderbolt header pin format has to match the specific PCIe Thunderbolt controller. So you need a header and a PCIe slot. PCIe Thunderbolt controller needs a slot with a 4 plus PCIe lanes. I still don't really understand the slot things that much, or lanes thing. PCIe Thunderbolt controller also connects to a USB header on the motherboard. Wow, this is crazy. Newer Thunderbolt controllers, Titan Ridge, need dedicated power like a higher end video card. I don't know if this power supply has it. I built everything the way he told me, so I don't know. We can see. When running Intel CPUs, clock speed throttling causes audio glitches with Thunderbolt 3 and 4. Disabling all clock speed throttling will raise your CPU temps roughly 10 plus degrees. Ironically, clock speed throttling isn't a problem running an AMD CPU like the newer Vermeer 5950X. Note that Microsoft only supports PCI via Thunderbolt, necessary for PCI level performance, with Thunderbolt 3 or 4 controllers. In other words, older Thunderbolt 2 controllers are all but worthless on a PC. So that's a lot to think about for running Thunderbolt. I'm probably not going to worry about... I know I keep going back and forth, but you know what? I'll worry about it when it comes with my computer and actually know it's working. And somebody else says, Focusrite just announced updates to their Claret line of audio interfaces. They are switching from Thunderbolt to USB. I think Thunderbolt is great, but it's overkill for an audio interface. I think, I don't know about overkill. Performance is performance. Okay. So I got a little bit more time. I want to talk about, We've done so many shows on routing, especially loopback, the problems of, if you're using Zoom or a broadcasting app like I'm doing right now, or meeting apps, Skype, things like that. If the program doesn't have ASIO, it's a very hard deal to get audio from one program to another. It's just a pain, and it's stupid that we've had the same problem for 20 years. And one sort of solution for this is loopback. There's virtual loopback drivers like VB Audio, I think is called. Yeah, VB Audio. And they've had this for a long time. Virtual audio cable. Virtual audio cable. And I've bought, I think, pretty much everything this guy's made because whether I use it or not, it's really important for me to support this development. There's virtual audio cable that can do some loopbacks. It can be sketchy, and that's why I worry about this stuff. He actually makes this thing called Voicemeeter that can really help. But again, you lose your low latency audio driver. There's some issues with it. There's a lot of issues with it, but it does work for a lot of things. RME has a loopback system. I'll show you guys my total mix for you guys that are actually on YouTube or whatever. Total Mix will allow you to do a loopback here. Actually, I think I'm using a loopback on 3132 to get out to the broadcast right now. I think that's true. I think I'm sending from OBS to a loopback, and then I'm sending that loopback into Restream. So I went for my home and my mobile computer. I bought some Focusrite 4i4s because they now have loopback on them. So I figure I will have their software loopback, and then I'll plug 3 and 4 out back into 3 and 4 in, and I'll have an analog loopback. Not as elegant, but at least it'll work. Not true. The way the Focusrite loopback works, you have to be coming from one of the playbacks. As far as I can tell, I've asked several places, and this is what I've come up with. So you only have the 1-2 out. You can't use those other ones for loopback. You can still use 3-4 for input, though, which is nice. That's not something you can do with the RME. With the RME, when you do a loopback, you lose that input as well. The other problem is this 4i4. The headphone outs are on 3 and 4, where the monitor outs are on 1 and 2. So you can't change that as far as I can tell. So that kind of sucks. That means that I have to. I don't even know what that means. So I can't use 3 and 4 for my loopback because I'm using that for my headphones. So what am I doing? So I guess I got to use 3 and 4 for my main outs. Do 1 and 2 for the loopbacks. I don't know. It's kind of a bummer. It really destroys the functionality of what that loopback could do for me, and it's just kind of a bummer. I'm gonna use these. I'm sure I'm gonna find a way to make them work well, but if I do it over again, instead of sending these back, hell with it. I would buy the 6i6, and then maybe we could get away with it a little bit better. And that'll be it for this week. I'll see you guys next week. I'm gonna go ride my bike or something. It's kind of hot already, but I'll see you guys later.